She stood by the doorway, slipping into those glossy red heels, her face set with an expression that told me she'd already made her decision about something. I sat at the kitchen table, feigning interest in a few emails that seemed irrelevant, but the sound of her heels clicking on the floor kept drawing me back. There was this strange energy in the air, an unspoken tension that made me want to ask her something, but I didn't. She never glanced at me. Finally, I broke the silence. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, though I felt a knot of tension in my stomach. My eyes remained fixed on my laptop, unwilling to appear too concerned, yet something about her felt off. "Out," she replied, her voice flat, the word hitting me like a stone. She adjusted the strap of her purse, showing no intention of offering any further explanation. "Out where?" I pressed, hoping for more details. Her gaze briefly flicked toward me, sharp and dismissive, but she didn't stop walking. "Just a party, Alex." A party? She'd never mentioned a party before. It was clear I wasn't invited, but at that moment, I didn't feel like going out anyway. I wasn't going to make a fuss over it. Yet, perhaps I should have. "Don't wait up," she added as she made her way to the door, not bothering to look back. I should have said something, but instead, I just sat there, frozen. She didn't offer any details, no explanation about whose party it was or anything of that sort. She simply left, and the door clicked shut behind her. That's when I felt it, a sudden coldness in the room. A hollow emptiness, like something important had been taken from me without my consent. I stood up, walked to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and tried to shake it off, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Then, an unsettling thought crept into my mind, uninvited and harsh. She's been so distant lately, more than usual. I took a sip, hoping it would drown out the thought. Maybe she was just stressed. Work had been tough for both of us, and we hadn't been close in a while. The last few times we tried, I could feel it. Something was wrong with me. My body just wouldn't cooperate, and it was mortifying. I knew it bothered her, even though she never said a word. Heck, it bothered me more than I was willing to admit. But still, this wasn't about that. Was it? An hour passed, but I couldn't focus on anything. The uncomfortable itch in my mind kept getting louder. Grabbing my phone, I scrolled through social media, looking for some sign of where she might be or what she was up to. Her Instagram was unusually quiet. No posts, no pictures, no updates with friends. By this time, she'd usually share something, anything, even a simple drink. That's when I noticed something odd. Sarah had left her location on our shared Google account, a mistake she rarely made. I shouldn't have checked, but I did. The map showed she wasn't at a party, like she'd claimed. Instead, she was somewhere I'd never heard of, in a neighborhood I knew she didn't frequent. Something about it felt off. My heart started to race. I stared at the screen, my mind racing with questions. Who is she with? Why is she in some random apartment complex? I shoved my phone back into my pocket, grabbed my car keys, and headed out the door. At that point, I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't angry yet, but numb. I needed to see it for myself. The drive felt suffocating, the tension in the air thick, making the world around me feel smaller. The streetlights blurred, the cars faded into nothingness. Only the path on my phone mattered, and the thought of finding her. My grip on the steering wheel tightened with each passing block. When I finally arrived, the building was nothing special. Just another worn-down apartment complex, the kind that blends into the cityscape. No loud music, no crowded parking lot, nothing that screamed party. It was quiet. Too quiet. I parked at the far end of the lot, trying to remain unnoticed. Not sure why I cared, but something inside me told me to stay low. I wasn't ready for this, but I couldn't stop myself. Each step toward the building felt heavier, like I was walking into something that would change everything. Just as I reached the entrance, I saw her. Sarah was walking out, accompanied by a man. Not just any man, Eric. I recognized him immediately. We'd met a couple of times at random gatherings years ago, but he wasn't a friend. He was just some guy from her life I never really paid attention to. And now, here he was, his hand resting on her lower back as he guided her out the door as if it was the most natural thing in the world. They were laughing. She looked more alive than I'd seen her in months. My stomach churned. My fists balled up in anger. I wanted to confront them, to march right up to them, but my feet wouldn't move. I just stood there, watching. My thoughts spiraled, each one more frantic than the last. But the truth was glaring at me clearer than ever. This wasn't a party. It was something else, and I had ignored the signs for far too long. That night, Sarah didn't just walk out on me. She walked away from whatever we still had left. The cracks that had been forming between us for months. They were no longer cracks. They had widened into open doors leading to something I wasn't prepared to face. But in that moment, I stood there, frozen. Watching as Eric's hand moved lower on Sarah's back, she didn't pull away. She didn't even hesitate. The way she laughed, the body language she gave off, and how she leaned into him. All of it felt so familiar. It screamed intimacy. A closeness you don't share with someone you've just met at a party. It was like someone had struck me in the chest, though the pain hadn't fully hit yet. It was that brief moment before everything crumbles, when your mind is still trying to process what your eyes are seeing. And what I saw was a betrayal that left me speechless. Sarah hadn't even noticed me. They turned the corner, heading toward his car, completely unaware that I was just a few feet away, standing frozen, trying to hold myself together. A wave of nausea washed over me. It felt like my insides were turning to stone. I knew I needed to do something, say something, but my body refused to cooperate. I was paralyzed, caught between two instincts. One that screamed for action, to confront them, to demand answers, and another, darker desire to simply walk away, to disappear and pretend I hadn't seen any of it. But then, something inside me snapped. My blood boiled, and I started moving toward them, my pace quickening. Faster, faster. Sarah, I called out, my voice sharper than I had intended. She turned around instantly. As soon as her eyes landed on me, the expression on her face dropped completely. That confident, carefree look she'd had moments earlier was gone, replaced by something I couldn't place. Guilt, maybe? She didn't say a word. She didn't try to hide anything. She just stood there, staring at me as though she were trying to gauge how much I had seen, how much I understood. Eric was slower to react. He lingered, a half-smile still on his face, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. The idiot didn't even recognize me at first. What the hell? I couldn't even finish my sentence. My thoughts were too tangled in a mix of rage and disbelief. My hands were trembling, and I was shaking all over. "What are you doing here, Alex?" she asked, her voice a blend of panic and annoyance, as if I was the one who didn't belong. Not her. What am I doing here? I shot back, my words dripping with fury. What the hell are you doing here, Sarah? With him. She blinked, her face twisting into something cold and dismissive. It's not what you think, she said, the audacity of her response striking me like a slap across the face. It was then that I realized she wasn't even going to deny it. There was no shock in her voice, no remorse that I had caught her. Instead, there was just a flat, pathetic excuse that mocked my intelligence. Not what I think, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. I saw you too. I'm not blind, Sarah. Don't insult me. Eric finally spoke, stepping forward with his hands raised, as if trying to calm the situation. Hey man, this isn't. Shut up. I cut him off, my voice a harsh snap. I wasn't about to let him spew whatever ridiculous excuse he had ready. I wanted answers, and I wanted them from her. Sarah? I growled, stepping closer. How long? She hesitated. Her eyes flicked toward Eric, weighing what to say. That little glance was enough to make my blood boil over again. How long? I repeated, louder this time. A few months, she muttered, her voice barely audible. A few months. The words hit me like a punch. This wasn't just some fleeting fling. This was a full-blown affair, carried out behind my back, all while I had been sitting at home, believing she was out with friends, or working late, or whatever other excuse she had thrown at me. I could feel a lump in my throat, a knot of rage and something else I couldn't quite name. Months. I echoed, my voice cracking slightly, though I hoped she didn't notice. And you didn't think to tell me? To end this. She sighed, as though she were already tired of this conversation, as though I were the one dragging it out. It's not that simple, Alex. Not that simple. I repeated, my voice rising with anger. You're sleeping with him, Sarah. What part of this is complicated? She didn't flinch at the accusation. Instead, she crossed her arms, glaring at me with a look that made me feel smaller than I ever had. Maybe if you weren't so checked out all the time, I wouldn't have had to, she said. The words hit me harder than I could have imagined. I blinked, trying to process what she had just said. She was blaming me? Me. As though all of this was somehow my fault. As if my issues were the reason she had gone behind my back. Checked out. I repeated, my voice shaking. You mean because of my impotence? The words felt like they were choking me. I had never said it aloud before, and the shame that followed was unbearable. But now, there it was, exposed like a dirty secret. And the look she gave me, pity mixed with disgust. She didn't even deny it. "You don't get it, Alex," she said coldly. "You haven't touched me in months. What was I supposed to do? Just wait around for you to figure yourself out?" I could hardly believe what I was hearing. It felt as if the floor had fallen away, and I was spiraling into an abyss. "What? You're tired of me not being able to what? So you run off to him?" I signaled to Eric, who had wisely taken a step back, staying out of the line of fire. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The truth was evident in her expression. That was it. There was no fixing this. No words that could repair the damage done. And yet, I remained frozen in place, unable to move, struggling to accept that the person I had built my life around had become someone unrecognizable to me. "I'm done, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "We're done." Just like that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there with him. I no longer cared. She could have him. But what I didn't realize at that moment was that walking away wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The drive home felt like I was in a haze. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that I thought my knuckles might crack. The road in front of me blurred as headlights passed by like ghostly streaks. My mind was spinning, trapped in an endless loop of the same bitter thoughts. Every time I tried to calm down, that image of Sarah leaning into Eric flashed in my mind, replaying like a disturbing movie that I couldn't stop. The anger inside me twisted, but beneath it, there was something worse, a profound emptiness, a hollow ache that I couldn't get rid of. By the time I reached home, the house felt like a foreign place. The familiar walls, the furniture, everything I had once known felt alien, as if I no longer belonged there. I slammed the front door, more forcefully than I intended, and stood there for a moment, listening to the echo reverberate through the silence. For a split second, I had the urge to destroy everything, shatter the dishes, tear down the pictures from the walls, anything that might reflect the chaos I felt inside. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I just stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the photos on the mantel. There was one from our wedding day, laughing, carefree, wrapped in a moment that now felt like it belonged to someone else. I picked it up and stared at it for a long time, my fingers gripping the frame tightly. How had it come to this? Finally, I tossed the frame onto the couch. I couldn't bear to look at it any longer. There was no clarity, no answers, just a heavy, suffocating fog of betrayal. Part of me still couldn't believe it. I had sensed something wasn't right for some time, but I never imagined it would come to this. The hours dragged on, each one feeling longer than the last. Time seemed to mock me. I sat in the dark, staring blankly at the wall, my mind replaying everything that had happened earlier that evening. On impulse, I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over her contact, my instincts urging me to text her, to demand answers, to yell at her through the screen. But what would be the point? What could she possibly say to make this better? Nothing. There was nothing left to say. I put the phone down, but then it buzzed. It was a message from her. "We need to talk. Don't make any rash decisions." Rash decisions? Was she serious? After everything she had done, I was the one being unreasonable? The heat surged in my chest again. It felt like she didn't even understand the gravity of what had happened, or worse, that she didn't care. I didn't respond. I didn't even want to. Instead, I tossed the phone aside, the message still gnawing at my thoughts. She wanted to talk? About what? She had months to be honest, months to come clean, but she chose to lie, to betray me in the worst possible way. Now she wanted to fix everything with words? I paced back and forth in the living room, each step fueling the rage building inside me. The house felt too quiet, my thoughts too loud. I needed something to drown it all out. Grabbing my keys, I left the house without a clear destination in mind. I just needed to escape, to clear my head, to put some distance between myself and the mess I had found myself in. I ended up at the one place I thought might offer a little relief, my friend Tyler's house. Tyler had known Sarah for years, and while I wasn't ready to unload everything, I couldn't bear being alone in that house any longer. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't losing my mind, that none of this was my fault. When I knocked on his door, he answered with a look of surprise. It was late, and I probably looked like I'd been through a war. But he didn't ask any questions, just gave me a concerned nod and motioned me inside. We sat down in his living room, and for a while, neither of us spoke. He handed me a beer, and we sat in silence while the TV hummed with a late-night show in the background. Eventually, I broke the quiet. I told him everything, the party, finding Sarah with Eric, the lies that had piled up over months. And finally, I told him about the text. Man, Tyler said, rubbing the back of his neck. That's rough. I don't even know what to say. I'm not looking for advice, I replied, my voice empty. I just needed to tell someone. Did she try to explain anything? He asked. Besides all that nonsense about you being checked out? He asked, shaking his head in disbelief. That's such a load of garbage. None of this is your fault. I don't know, I muttered. She said it wasn't that simple. My mind flashed back to the confrontation. It was like she was trying to suggest there was some hidden complexity to her actions, as if betraying me behind my back wasn't enough. Tyler took a long gulp from his drink before speaking again. Man, she's trying to manipulate the situation. You know that, right? She wants you to believe you're partly at fault, so she doesn't have to carry the full burden of it. I nodded, though part of me still questioned whether I had let things get too far. Maybe I had been distant. Maybe I had checked out of the relationship. No, I couldn't let her twist it like that. Whatever had gone wrong between us, this was on her. She made the choice, not me. So, what now? Tyler asked after a long silence. I have no idea, I admitted, my voice quieter now. I told her it was over, but I'm not sure I meant it. Do you want it to be over? Tyler pressed, his eyes locked on me. I stared down at my hands, the weight of his question sinking in. Did I? 6 years of my life, just gone like that? Walking away seemed impossible. But the other part of me, the part that couldn't erase the image of her with Eric, didn't know how I could ever look at her the same way again. I don't know, I said softly, barely above a whisper. I really don't know what I want anymore. Tyler gave me a knowing look, his voice calm. Take your time, man. But don't let her guilt trip you into staying if it doesn't feel right. I stayed at his place for another hour, but my mind was 1,000 miles away. It felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, torn between letting go and holding on for dear life. Every choice seemed impossible. Every decision felt too heavy. By the time I got back to the house, the first light of dawn was creeping over the horizon. I stood at the front door, my hand resting on the doorknob, feeling the weight of what awaited me inside. The sun was barely up, casting a faint glow on the neighborhood, but all I felt was darkness. I knew what Sarah would want. She'd want to talk, to explain, to make excuses. But was there anything left to say? I wasn't sure there was anything that could fix what was broken. I opened the door and stepped inside, the house greeting me with the same cold silence. No sign of Sarah yet, but something told me the real confrontation hadn't even begun. The quiet in the house was suffocating, the kind of silence that made the walls feel like they were holding their breath, waiting for something to shatter. I stood there, feeling the weight of the air pressing down on me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I wasn't sure if it was anger, fear, or a mix of both. I knew Sarah wouldn't leave things like this. She'd be back soon, probably already coming up with some excuse, something to make me feel guilty. But I wasn't going to fall for it. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one we used to share our breakfasts, laugh, and talk about our days. It felt like a lifetime ago now. I stared at the grain of the wood, tracing the lines with my finger, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. What was I supposed to say when she walked through that door? How could I even begin a conversation like this? I wasn't sure I wanted to talk anymore. Part of me just wanted to pack a bag, walk out, and never look back. But the other part, the part that was still holding on to hope, wanted answers. Why didn't she tell me? Had I really been that blind? I heard her car pull into the driveway. Instantly, my body went rigid, like a coiled spring about to snap. I didn't move, though. I stayed at the table, my hands clenched into fists, staring ahead. The door opened, and there she was. Sarah didn't say anything at first. She just stood there in the doorway, holding her keys, looking at me as though I were a stranger. Her face was blank, guarded, like she had already decided how the conversation was going to unfold. I hated that expression, the one that said she was already 2 steps ahead of me, already planning her next move. Alex, she said, her voice low and careful. We need to talk. I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence hang in the air, hoping she would feel its weight. But she didn't seem to care. She walked over to the kitchen island and dropped her keys with a sigh. What do you want to talk about, Sarah? I finally asked, breaking the silence. My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. What's left to say? She looked at me, her eyes narrowing as if she was measuring how much she needed to fix. I know you're upset, but we can't just leave things hanging. We need to talk about what happened. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh in the quiet room. What happened? You mean you sneaking around with some guy for months? That's what we need to talk about. She sighed again, like it was all just too much to deal with. It's not that simple, Alex. I've told you before. Things have been off between us for a while. Off, I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. That's your excuse? The situation felt off. You decided to cheat, yet she showed no sign of surprise. I didn't plan to cheat, she said. It just happened. You've been distant, I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. You barely talk to me anymore, and even less than that. Do anything else with me. I didn't know what else to do, she said, and once again, she attempted to shift the blame, making it seem like this was somehow my fault. I clenched my jaw, doing my best to control my anger. So, because I've been dealing with my own issues, because I've been stressed, you thought the best solution was to go and sleep with someone else? That's your logic. Her arms folded tightly across her chest, her expression hardening. You weren't giving me any other options, Alex. I can't just wait around for you to decide to fix things. My blood began to boil. Fix things? I asked, my voice barely containing my fury. You could have talked to me, Sarah. You could have told me how you felt, that you were unhappy. But instead, you lied, over and over, for months. Her face stiffened, her lips pressing into a thin line. I didn't want to hurt you. I slammed my fist on the table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. Too late, I snapped. You didn't want to hurt me? Do you have any idea what you've done? Can you seriously think I can just forget what I saw tonight? What you've been doing with him? She turned her gaze downward, her eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time, she seemed rattled, perhaps not expecting me to be this furious. But she recovered quickly. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said. Eric was just there. He understood me in ways you didn't. I felt like I was choking on disbelief. He understood you? What does that even mean? Sarah, you're telling me you cheated on me because he was a good listener. Her gaze snapped back up to mine, her anger now matching mine. It wasn't just that. It was about feeling something again. You shut me out, Alex. You weren't there anymore. You haven't been for a long time. And I was tired of waiting. Tired of waiting? I echoed, my voice a growl. So instead of working on things, you just threw it all away. What a great solution. I didn't throw anything away, she retorted sharply. You did. You gave up on us long before I did. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. She wasn't going to admit anything. She wasn't going to own up to what she had done. Instead, it was all being turned around, spun into a version of events where I was the one to blame. I didn't give up, Sarah, I said through clenched teeth. I was still here, still trying to figure things out. I didn't run off and cheat the second things got tough. She opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her a chance. You made your choice, I said coldly. You chose him. Now you have to live with that. For the first time, I saw a crack in her expression. Maybe it was doubt or fear. She wasn't as in control of the situation as she had thought. Alex, No. I cut her off, my voice firm. I'm done. You want to know what happens next? I'm leaving. You can stay here with your excuses, with whatever you've built up in your mind to justify this. But I'm out. Leaving, she repeated, her voice sounding more surprised than I expected. Where are you going? I don't know yet, I replied, my tone sharp. But it sure as hell won't be here. Not with you. She stepped forward, her expression softening, her voice taking on a pleading tone. Alex, don't do this. We can still fix this. We can talk. We can work through it. I shook my head, barely able to meet her eyes. No, Sarah. You can't undo what you've done. You can't erase the lies, the secrets. You made your bed. Now you can lie in it. The silence between us was suffocating, like we were both standing on the edge of a cliff, one wrong move away from falling. For a moment, I thought she might break down, apologize, or beg me to stay, but she didn't. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me with that cold look creeping back into her eyes. She didn't care. Not really. I grabbed my jacket and walked toward the door, not bothering to look back. I could feel her eyes on me, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I opened the door and stepped into the night. The cool air hit me, and for a moment, I felt like I could breathe again. As I walked toward my car, a new realization began to sink in. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The sound of the front door slamming behind me echoed in the night, but the sense of finality I had hoped for didn't come. Instead, as I stood by my car, my breath forming angry clouds in the cold air, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't over. Not even close. Walking away was just the beginning. I knew Sarah wasn't the type of person to let things end without a fight. I opened the car door, slid into the driver's seat, and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. My heart was still pounding, adrenaline coursing through my veins. But beneath the anger, there was something worse. Something darker. Doubt. Was I truly ready to walk away? I stood there, questioning whether I was really prepared to destroy everything we had built together. My thoughts kept drifting back to the conversation inside. Her voice had started out calm but quickly turned frantic, trying to justify her betrayal as if it was the only option she had left. We can still fix this, she had insisted. We can talk it out. We can work through it. Work through it? I bitterly scoffed at the thought. How do you work through months of lies? How do you push past the image of your wife with another man forever etched in your mind? The truth was, you can't. You just can't. Yet, despite all that, a tiny flicker of doubt refused to fade. What if she was right? What if this was somehow my fault? Had I been neglectful? I had been so wrapped up in work, stress, and my own problems that I barely noticed the distance growing between us. Maybe I had pushed her away without even realizing it. No. I forced the thought aside. This wasn't my burden to bear. You don't betray someone you love just because things get hard. She had options. She made her choice. She chose him. But then another, colder thought slipped in. What if I couldn't fix myself? What if this happened again with someone else? That fear clung to me, deep and paralyzing. The one thing I couldn't bear to face. Maybe, just maybe, Sarah was right about one thing. Things between us had been broken for a long time. But instead of trying to repair it, she chose to destroy everything. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life. I had to leave. I couldn't stay there anymore, not in front of the house we once shared. As I pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of the front window. The light was still on. She was still inside, likely pacing, already planning her next move. Sarah didn't give up easily, and I knew she wouldn't just let me walk away without putting up a fight. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours. The streets were empty, the world seemed so distant, and I could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on me. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, and I immediately knew who it was. Sarah. I didn't want to look at her message, but the temptation was too strong. I grabbed my phone and read her words. We need to finish this. Come back. We can talk. Don't do something you'll regret. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound jarring in the quiet of the car. Don't do something I'll regret? She didn't have a clue, did she? The regret wasn't mine to carry, it was hers. But I didn't reply. I wasn't ready to get sucked into her game just yet. I needed time. Time to think. Time to breathe. Time to figure out what I wanted, without her pulling the strings. That's what it felt like she was trying to control everything, trying to turn this disaster into something that would serve her. I kept driving, the miles slipping by until I ended up parked in front of Tyler's place. It was the only place that felt like refuge. The only person I could talk to who wouldn't offer empty excuses or tell me to just work things out. I needed someone who could remind me that I wasn't crazy for feeling like my entire life had been shattered. Tyler answered the door, his face a mix of surprise and concern. You're back, he said, stepping aside to let me in. What happened? Without a word, I walked past him and collapsed onto his couch. The exhaustion hit me in waves, my body finally catching up with the emotional wreckage of the night. I told her it's over, I said, my voice hollow. I walked out. Tyler nodded slowly and sat down across from me. Good. You need to be away from her. At least for now. You need space to figure this out. I stared at the floor, my hands trembling. She's not going to let it go, man. She's already texting me, trying to get me to come back and talk. Like talking is going to fix any of this. Tyler snorted. Talk? What's there to talk about? She cheated. She lied. You don't owe her a damn thing. I know, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. But she's really good at this. She knows how to twist things, make me feel like I'm the one who messed up. She keeps saying I pushed her away, that she had no choice. Tyler leaned forward, his expression turning serious. Alex, listen to me. That's complete bullshit. You didn't make her cheat. You didn't put her in Eric's bed. She made those choices. She had a choice, and she chose to betray you. Don't let her make you feel guilty for something you didn't do. I wanted to believe him. I did. But Sarah's words kept playing in my mind, her disappointed look, the feeling that somehow I had failed her. It was hard to shake. Even after everything, a part of me still wanted to fix things, to go back to how things were before. But how do you go back to that? How do you unsee the truth? I pulled my phone out again, rereading Sarah's message for the 100th time. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't even know what I wanted to say. Maybe I wanted to hear her beg for forgiveness. Maybe I wanted her to admit it was all her fault. Or maybe I just wanted her to feel the same pain that I did. I'm thinking about going back. I muttered quietly, more to myself than to Tyler. Tyler shot me a piercing glance. What? You can't be serious, Alex. No, don't do this. Don't go back there. His voice was laced with concern. I quickly reassured him, though even I wasn't entirely convinced by my own words. I'm not saying I'm staying. I need closure. I need to hear her say it. I need to know if she truly feels any remorse, or if this is just her way of keeping control over me. Tyler shook his head in frustration. Man, she doesn't care. She's only concerned with saving face. She'll tell you whatever you want to hear just to keep you attached. You realize that, right? I nodded, but doubt still lingered beneath the surface, gnawing at me. I don't know, Tyler. I don't even know what I'm doing anymore. Tyler sighed, reclining in his chair. Look, I get it. I understand you need to work through this your own way, but promise me one thing. Don't let her mess with your head. You've already seen who she really is. Don't let her rewrite the story. I stayed at Tyler's place for another hour, locked in internal conflict. I was torn between confronting her one last time and the overwhelming urge to just walk away and never look back. By the time I left, the first hints of daylight were creeping over the horizon, painting the streets in a cold, pale glow. As I drove home, my mind replayed every possible scenario, imagining every conversation I might have with her. Deep down, I knew that nothing she said would make things right. But there was still a twisted part of me that needed to hear it, needed to get some kind of answer, even if it only caused more pain. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as it always had, serene, almost inviting, but I knew better. Inside, it was a battlefield. I got out of the car and approached the front door, hesitating for a moment as my hand rested on the doorknob. I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever was to come. This wasn't over, not yet. I stood there, gripping the doorknob so tightly it almost hurt. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to turn around, get back in the car, and leave. But something inside me wouldn't let me. There was unfinished business here, something drawing me back into this disaster. It felt like I couldn't walk away until I had the answers I was searching for, even if those answers ultimately tore me apart. With one last breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her back to me as though she had been waiting for hours. She hadn't changed out of the black dress she wore earlier, the same one that now seemed to symbolize everything broken between us. Her phone lay untouched on the table in front of her, but she didn't seem interested in it. When I entered, she didn't even acknowledge me immediately. She just stayed there, staring down at the table, her posture stiff, as if preparing for a confrontation. I closed the door behind me, the sound breaking the silence and causing her to slowly turn her head. Her eyes met mine. There was no trace of the coldness I had seen earlier. Instead, she looked exhausted, almost defeated. But I knew better than to let that mask deceive me. I'd seen that expression before. It was the face of someone who knew how to twist situations and manipulate emotions. Alex, she spoke quietly, her voice thick with what seemed like regret. You came back. I didn't answer right away. I took a few steps deeper into the room, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on me. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms, unwilling to sit down and make this conversation comfortable. I didn't come back for you, I said flatly. I came back because I need answers. She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on mine, but she remained silent. I could see her mind working, calculating. She knew I wasn't about to accept any simple explanations, so she tread carefully. Why? I asked, cutting through the silence. Why, Sarah? Why didn't you talk to me before it all went this far? Why let it get to this point? She blinked, and for a brief moment, I saw the facade crack. A flash of something raw flickered in her eyes, but she quickly buried it. It wasn't supposed to happen, Alex. It wasn't like I was looking for this. Things just spiraled. That's not an answer, I retorted sharply. I'm not asking for excuses. I'm asking why you chose to betray me instead of talking to me. Why him, of all people? She took a slow breath, her fingers tracing the edge of her phone as if it offered some comfort. It wasn't about him. It was never about Eric, specifically. He was just there. Available. I don't know how else to explain it. That's complete nonsense, and you know it, I snapped, the anger bubbling up once again. You don't just fall into bed with someone because they're available. There's more to it than that. You chose him over me. Over us. She looked away, her expression tightening with frustration. I didn't choose him, Alex. It wasn't like I wanted this to happen. Things between us were falling apart, and I didn't know how to fix it. You weren't there anymore. And there it was again. That same excuse. The same old attempt to flip the narrative and make it look like I was the one who pushed her into this. Stop blaming me, I warned, my voice low but filled with tension. Stop acting like you had no control in this. You had choices, Sarah. You could have talked to me, shared what you were feeling, but instead, you chose to lie. For months. She glared back at me, her eyes narrowing as her frustration bubbled up. Do you really think I wanted things to turn out this way? She demanded. Do you think I wanted to sneak around behind your back? I tried, Alex. I tried reaching out to you, but each time I did, you shut me out. You buried yourself in work and your own issues, leaving me here, feeling invisible. Shut me out, I echoed, my voice growing louder. You mean because I couldn't be close with you? Because I was dealing with my own mess? And you chose to go find that connection with someone else. She flinched when I mentioned it, and for a moment, I could almost see a trace of guilt in her eyes. But then, her expression hardened again. It wasn't just about that, she said. It was about you giving up on us. I wasn't going to wait around, hoping you'd figure things out. I needed something. I needed to feel alive again. Alive, I spat the word out bitterly. So, sleeping with Eric made you feel alive? That was your solution to fix everything? It wasn't about him, she retorted sharply, her voice quivering now as the tension between us surged. It was about feeling like I mattered to someone. Like I wasn't invisible. Her words struck me with such force that I almost couldn't process them. I stared at her, trying to make sense of it all. You felt invisible? And somehow, that's my fault? I didn't say it was all your fault, she quickly corrected, her voice softening as if trying to calm the situation. I needed something that you weren't giving me. And instead of trying to fix that, you took the easy way out, I said, my voice cold and firm. You went behind my back, lied to me, and now you're acting like you had no other choice. She dropped her head into her hands, rubbing her temples, as if the conversation was wearing her down. I didn't know how to stop it, Alex. Once it started, it felt like there was no way to undo it. There was, I shot back. You could have ended it. You could have chosen to fight for us. But you didn't. You tossed us aside for him. Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. She didn't respond this time. She simply sat there, staring at the table, her face pale and her hands trembling slightly. For a brief moment, I thought maybe I had finally reached her. Maybe she was starting to understand the weight of her actions. But when she looked up, what I saw in her eyes wasn't regret or guilt. It was resentment. You act like you're the only one who's suffering here, she said, her voice low but venomous. As if I haven't been hurting, too. I didn't want this, Alex. I didn't want any of it. But you didn't leave me with a choice. You were so consumed with your own problems, your own failures, that you never saw how much I was drowning. I reached out to you again and again, but you weren't there. I stared at her, disbelief mixing with anger in my chest. I wasn't there? I wasn't there? Do you even hear yourself? Yes, I've been fighting my own demons, but I've been here. I've been trying to make this work. You're the one who checked out. You're the one who betrayed me. Suddenly, she stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor as frustration flushed her face. You're right, Alex, she snapped. I betrayed you. But don't pretend like you were the perfect husband who had no part in this. You pushed me away. You made me feel like I didn't matter. And now you're angry because I found someone who made me feel like I was worth something. Her words hovered between us, heavy with bitterness, and I felt the last shred of my resolve snap. There it was, the true Sarah. The one who wouldn't admit her fault. The one who was going to twist everything around and act like I was the one responsible. I shook my head, disgusted. You actually believe that? You really think I'm the reason you cheated? I'm the reason everything fell apart? She didn't answer. She just stood there, arms crossed, her eyes burning with a mixture of anger and defiance. She wasn't going to apologize. She wasn't going to take full responsibility. Not in the way I needed her to. I'm done, Sarah, I said, my voice hollow and weary. I came here seeking closure, but there's nothing more to say. She didn't move. She didn't try to stop me. She simply stood there, her gaze bitter and unmoving. Without another word, I turned and walked out the door, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. This time, when the door slammed behind me, it felt final. There was no turning back. No more conversations. No more attempts to understand. It was over. But as I climbed into my car and drove away, something unexpected washed over me. A feeling I hadn't anticipated. Relief. But as I got in my car and drove off, a strange new feeling settled in, one I hadn't expected. Relief. As I drove, the street lights blurred past me, flickering in the night. For the first time in what felt like forever, my mind wasn't racing. It was eerily calm, almost vacant. Sarah's words still echoed in the back of my mind, but their grip on me had loosened. The moment I walked out that door, something inside me changed. It wasn't just anger or pain anymore. It was relief. When I said it was over, I meant it with an honesty I hadn't felt before. There would be no more arguing, no more trying to make sense of things that couldn't be understood. Sarah and I had crossed a line, one neither of us could undo. But even as I gained clarity, an unsettling emptiness gnawed at me. I knew, deep down, that something had been broken long before tonight. Sarah hadn't suddenly decided to betray me. Perhaps she had been selfish, perhaps she hadn't cared enough to fix things, but this mess didn't just appear out of nowhere. We both played a part in it. But I didn't have to carry the blame for everything she had done. The cold night air crept in through the crack in my window, sending a chill across my skin, but it was grounding. I kept driving, with no particular destination in mind, just focusing on the feel of the road beneath my tires. The world outside was silent, frozen. My thoughts wandered back to our wedding day, to the way we smiled at each other, believing nothing could ever go wrong. How naive that seemed now. People often say that marriage is hard and requires effort, but no one prepares you for how it can unravel, how tiny cracks can spread until you don't even recognize the person in front of you. I didn't want to dwell on it any longer, didn't want to relive the conversations, the silent nights, or the moments where I could have done something different. But really, what would that change now? My phone buzzed again, lighting up the seat next to me. I glanced at it, knowing exactly who it was before I even looked. Sarah. Her message read, "We should talk tomorrow. I know you're hurt, but this doesn't have to be the end." I almost laughed. How else was this supposed to end? With forgiveness? With me pretending that something could be fixed when it clearly couldn't? I tossed my phone aside, not bothering to respond. There was nothing left to say. Not anymore. But despite my resolve to shut her out, a small part of me wondered, could we have fixed it? If I had seen the signs sooner, if I hadn't been so consumed by my own issues, would things have been different? Would she have chosen me over Eric? I shook my head, trying to silence those thoughts. It was a pointless cycle, a spiral of regret and second-guessing. The truth was, I would never know, and I had to learn to live with that. As I passed the city limits and headed down quiet, unfamiliar backroads, I realized I had nowhere to go. Tyler had already given me more of his time than I deserved, and I wasn't about to show up at his place again, a mess of confusion. I needed solitude, space. There was a small motel I had driven by a few times, the kind of place you only notice when you're desperate for somewhere to vanish. I pulled into the lot, the neon sign flickering, some of the letters barely visible. It looked as tired as I felt. Perfect. I parked the car, grabbed my overnight bag, a quick packing job before I left the house, and walked inside. The clerk barely glanced up as I handed over my credit card. With little more than a bored nod, he slid a key across the counter. I didn't care about his indifference. I just wanted a room, somewhere I could shut the door and sleep without thinking. The room was just what I expected, dingy, with faded floral wallpaper and a bed that creaked when I sat down. I didn't bother with the TV. I threw my bag on the floor, kicked off my shoes, and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence was overwhelming, almost suffocating. For a brief moment, I wished I had stayed at Tyler's. At least there, the silence would have been filled with his voice, someone telling me I wasn't crazy, that I was doing the right thing. But I needed this. I needed to sit with the consequences of everything that had just happened, to let the weight of it settle in, to accept it. Sarah wasn't coming back, and I wasn't going back to her. I closed my eyes and exhaled deeply. The bed creaked beneath me as I shifted, but the sound barely registered. My mind wandered, revisiting the memories of the last few years with Sarah, the good ones, the bad ones. There were more of the latter than I cared to admit. Fights over trivial things, long silences that stretched into days, that undeniable sense of distance I could never close. Then, her words came back to me. You weren't there anymore. I hated that those words had stayed with me, hated that deep down. I knew there was some truth in them. I had checked out, hadn't I? It was hard to admit, but I couldn't deny it. There were countless moments when my insecurities and past mistakes kept me from reaching out to her. I could have fought harder to save us, but I didn't, and she, instead of confronting me, chose the easy way out. She didn't make an effort to show me what I was missing, and that was what hurt the most, not just the betrayal, but the fact that she hadn't tried to fix things. I sat up, my gaze fixed on the faded, cracked wallpaper, and for the first time that night, I allowed myself to truly absorb the weight of everything. I wasn't going back to her. This wasn't some argument we'd get past. This was it. I had left, and I was going to stay gone. But that left me wondering, where did that leave me? Alone, in a rundown motel, questioning how my life had spiraled so far out of control. I stood up, pacing the room, trying to shake off the feeling of being trapped. It was overwhelming, thinking about all that had been lost, everything that was broken, my marriage, my trust, and my sense of who I was anymore. And then, it hit me. Sarah wasn't the only one who had betrayed me. I had betrayed myself by allowing things to continue for as long as they did. I had ignored the warning signs, suppressed the uncomfortable truths, and convinced myself things would get better without putting in the effort. And now, here I was, facing the consequences. I sat back down on the bed, this time with a deep sense of finality. It was over. The life I had imagined, the future we were supposed to build together, it was gone. But perhaps, just perhaps, that wasn't the worst part. Maybe this was the wake-up call I needed. Not just about Sarah, but about myself. About how far I had let myself go. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't have a plan. But one thing was certain. When I stepped back into my life, it wouldn't be with Sarah by my side. And for the first time that night, I felt a small, fragile sense of peace. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the thin motel curtains, casting a soft, almost reluctant light over the room. It felt strange to wake up alone, without the usual rush to go back home, without the pressure of facing Sarah or trying to fix what was beyond repair. The world outside seemed to move on, indifferent to the chaos inside my life. I lay there for a while, staring up at the ceiling, letting the silence settle around me. The empty ache in my chest was still there, but it wasn't as sharp as before. It had become more of a lingering echo of pain, something I could live with, something I had to live with. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through a few missed messages. One from Tyler, just checking in. A couple of work emails, but they didn't matter. And then, of course, there was another message from Sarah. We can fix this. Please don't leave things like this. I love you. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't feel the usual urge to respond. Her words didn't stir the same desperation they once had. They felt hollow now, as though she was desperately clinging to something that was already lost. The love she spoke of? It had faded long before either of us had the courage to admit it. I placed the phone down. There was no need to reply anymore. Not now. She had made her choice, and now, so had I. I wasn't going back to the life we had built on lies, resentment, and half-truths. The hours passed slowly, but strangely, I felt at peace with the stillness. I didn't rush to gather my things or figure out what came next. Instead, I let myself sit with the reality of it all. The end of my marriage. The end of Sarah's hold over me. And with each minute, I felt a little lighter, as if a burden I didn't even realize I was carrying had been lifted. It wasn't until late afternoon that I finally decided to check out of the motel. I left the key on the nightstand, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside into the cool autumn air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement. I paused by my car, taking it all in. The freedom felt strange, almost unfamiliar. After years of trying to hold onto something that had been broken for far too long, I was finally free. But with freedom came uncertainty. Where was I supposed to go now? What did life look like without Sarah? I got in the car, turned the key, and drove aimlessly, not really knowing where I was headed. The roads felt different, the air fresher, as if I were seeing the world with new eyes. As I passed by the places we used to visit, the coffee shop where we spent hours on our first date, the park where we had shared lazy Sunday afternoons, I didn't feel the sting of memories. Instead, there was detachment, as though I were driving through someone else's past. After some time, I found myself at Tyler's place. He opened the door, already knowing what had happened. He didn't need to ask. I had been here enough times that he could read everything in my face. Coffee? He asked, already heading to the kitchen. Yeah, I mumbled, stepping inside and dropping my bag by the door. I walked into Tyler's home, and without needing any questions or explanations, he recognized everything from the look on my face. Do you want some coffee? He asked as he moved toward the kitchen. Sure, I replied quietly, stepping inside and letting my bag fall to the floor beside me. The apartment was cluttered, but it had a kind of cozy, lived-in charm. Tyler's place had always felt that way, like it didn't matter whether everything was perfect or neatly arranged. It was something I appreciated even more at that moment. He handed me a mug and settled into the chair across from me at the kitchen table. The silence between us was comfortable, not awkward. We didn't feel the need to fill it with unnecessary conversation. He knew I wasn't ready to dive into every little detail, and I was thankful for that. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. After a few sips of my coffee, Tyler leaned back in his chair, glancing at me. "So, what's the plan now?" he asked. I shrugged. "I don't know, man. I don't think there's a plan. Not yet." He nodded slowly and took a sip of his coffee. "Are you staying here for a while?" "If that's all right with you," I replied. "I just need some time to figure things out. I don't know if I can stay in that house, not with everything that's happened." "Of course, you can stay," Tyler said without hesitation. "As long as you need." I nodded, feeling grateful. I wasn't sure what was coming next, but I was certain I couldn't go back to that house. Not with all the memories, the arguments, and the ghost of the life Sarah and I had tried to build. That place wasn't home anymore. Maybe it never had been. Later, as we sat together in front of the TV, half watching some random show, my phone buzzed once again. I glanced at it, already knowing who it was from. "Alex, I'm sorry. I don't want this to be the end. Please call me." I stared at the screen for a long while, feeling nothing. There was no anger, no sadness, just a sense of acceptance. I had already made my decision, and no number of texts or apologies from Sarah could change that. She had made her choice, and now she had to face the consequences. I wasn't her safety net anymore. I wasn't the guy she could rely on while she figured out what she really wanted. I deleted the message, tossed the phone aside, and returned my focus to the TV. This was the point in some stories where the characters claim they've found peace, that they've moved on or grown from the experience. But that wasn't where I was. Not yet, at least. The truth was, I had no idea what moving on even looked like. All I knew was that I couldn't stay stuck in the past. There would be more sleepless nights, more mornings when I'd feel the absence of Sarah, when I'd instinctively reach for my phone expecting to see her name. But I also knew those moments would eventually pass. Over time, the pain would lessen, the anger would fade, and I wouldn't see her ghost in every corner of my life anymore. And when that day arrived, I'd be ready to begin again. But for now, I stayed in the stillness, not rushing toward the future and not dragging myself back into the past. I was right here, in the present, experiencing the calm after the storm. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough.